Picture this, you're sprawled on your couch, doom scrolling through your phone, maybe grumbling because your food delivery is 10 minutes late or your Wi-Fi's acting up. Now rewind the clock $74,000 years. Your ancestors didn't have apps to complain about. They were too busy dodging ash clouds so thick they turned day into night, trying to survive a world where the sky itself seemed to have a personal vendetta against them. Welcome to the Toba super eruption, the ultimate plot twist in Earth's history that nearly wiped out humanity. Today, we're kicking off a wild ride through this apocalyptic event, exploring how a single volcano almost canceled our species, reshaped the climate, and left our ancestors scrambling to stay alive. Spoiler alert, they didn't have a survival guide or a FEMA hotline to call. So what exactly went down with Toba about 74,000 years ago? A supervolcano in what's now Indonesia decided it was time to make a statement. This wasn't some cute little volcano puffing out a bit of smoke. Oh no, Toba went full rockstar meltdown, unleashing an eruption so massive it makes modern disasters look like a minor inconvenience. Scientists estimate Toba spewed out around 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash and rock, enough to fill over 1 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's not just a bad day, that's a catastrophe that rewrote the rules of survival. The eruption was so intense it left behind a massive caldera, now Lake Toba, a serene tourist spot that hides its villainous past like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's set the stage for what life was like before Toba decided to ruin everyone's day. Our ancestors' early Homo sapiens were not exactly living the dream. They were small bands of hunter-gatherers armed with basic stone tools, chasing down antelope or scavenging berries while hoping they didn't end up as lunch for a saber-toothed cat. Life was already a grind, think, constant cardio, no days off, and a diet that was paleo by necessity, not choice. Then Toba erupted, and the world went from tough to straight up apocalyptic. The eruption pumped so much ash and sulfur into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun, plunging the planet into what scientists call a volcanic winter. Temperatures plummeted possibly by as much as 10 degrees C in some regions. That's not just bring a jacket weather, that's good luck finding food when everything's dead weather. The fallout was brutal. Ash blanketed entire regions, smothering plants and turning water sources into toxic sludge. Imagine waking up to a world where the ground looks like a giant ashtray and the air smells like a chemistry experiment gone wrong. Food chains collapsed as plants died off, herbivores starved, and predators followed. For our ancestors, this was like playing a survival game on the hardest difficulty with no save points. And here's the kicker, some scientists believe Toba caused a genetic bottleneck, meaning humanity's population crashed to as few as 10,000 people. That's right, our entire species could have fit into a small college football stadium. One bad move and we'd all be a footnote in Earth's history, like the dodo or dial-up internet. Now let's take a moment to appreciate the absurdity of this. While we're out here whining about a dead phone battery or a long line at the coffee shop, our ancestors were staring down a sky full of ash, wondering if the sun was ever coming back. They didn't have grocery stores, emergency kits, or even a decent pair of shoes. All they had were some sharp sticks, a few rocks, and a whole lot of grit, and yet somehow they made it through. How were they just built different? Did they stumble onto some prehistoric life hacks we've long forgotten, or were they just the luckiest underdogs in history? The effects of Toba didn't just vanish after a week. The ash and gases lingered, cooling the planet for years, maybe even a decade. Forests turned to grasslands, animals disappeared, and our ancestors had to figure out how to survive in a world that looked like it was auditioning for a dystopian movie. Some researchers argue this disaster pushed humans to get smarter, developing better tools, hunting strategies, or even social skills to work together. Others think the bottleneck idea might be a bit dramatic, pointing to evidence that some human groups like those in Africa or India kept on living despite Toba's chaos. Either way, the fact that we're here sipping overpriced lattes and binge-watching shows means someone somewhere figured out how to beat the odds. So what's the takeaway from this ancient disaster? For one, it's a stark reminder that Earth doesn't care about your plans. Toba showed that nature can flip the script in an instant, and our ancestors had to adapt or die. Today we've got our own challenges, climate change, wildfires, storms that seem to get angrier every year. We might not face ash clouds, but we're still dancing with a planet that can throw curveballs. Maybe there's something to learn from those early humans who refused to give up, even when the world turned to ash. Because if they could survive with nothing but their wits and determination, surely we can handle a power outage or two without losing it. Alright, we've just scratched the surface of this epic survival story. How did our ancestors actually pull through this nightmare? What tricks did they use to outsmart a world gone mad? And what can their struggle teach us about preparing for whatever curveballs the future might throw? Hang tight, because we're about to dive deeper into the chaos of Toba's aftermath and how it shaped who we are today. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Alright, so we've just survived the opening act of the Toba super eruption, where the sky turned into a smoky nightmare, and our ancestors were left wondering if they'd ever see the sun again. About 74,000 years ago, this supervolcano in modern-day Indonesia didn't just erupt, it threw a planet-sized tantrum spewing ash and gas that plunged the world into a volcanic winter. Life went from tough to are we all gonna die? Real quick, but here's the wild part: our ancestors, armed with little more than sharp sticks and sheer stubbornness, didn't just roll over and give up. They fought through the chaos and came out the other side. So let's dive into the gritty details of how they pulled off this miracle, what Toba's fallout did to their world, and why this disaster might have been the ultimate glow-up for humanity. Imagine you're one of these early humans. You're huddled in a cave, the air reeks of sulfur, and the sun's been playing hide and seek for months. Your stomach's growling louder than the hyenas circling outside, and the only food around is some sketchy-looking roots you scraped out of an ash-covered patch of dirt. This was the reality after Toba. The eruption didn't just make life inconvenient, it turned the world upside down. Ash blanketed entire regions, sometimes piling up to 15 centimeters thick like a snowstorm from hell. Plants choked under the debris, water sources turned into toxic sludge, and the global cooling caused by sulfur gases blocking sunlight tank temperatures by up to 10 degrees C in some places. That's not just chilly, it's the kind of cold that kills crops, starves animals, and leaves you wondering if you'll ever eat again. The domino effect was brutal, with plants dying off, herbivores like antelope or deer started dropping. Predators already cranky from hunger weren't far behind. For our ancestors who were already low on the food chain, this was like playing a survival game with the difficulty cranked to impossible. No supermarkets, no delivery apps, just you, your clan, and a world that suddenly looked like a post-apocalyptic movie set. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't just survive, they adapted. How? Let's break it down to 3 key ingredients: adaptability, brainpower, and a dash of dumb luck. First up, adaptability. These early humans were nomads, always on the move to follow food. When Toba turned their usual hunting grounds into a wasteland, they didn't sit around complaining about the bad vibes they packed up and left. Archaeological sites like Jwalapuram in India show humans using stone tools before and after the eruption, suggesting they didn't just give up. They likely migrated to less affected areas, maybe following surviving animal herds or heading to coasts where fish were still swimming. Compare that to us throwing a fit when our GPS takes us down a bumpy road. These folks were rerouting their entire existence with no map, no compass, just a gut feeling and a lot of hustle. Next, let's talk brain power. Toba's aftermath forced our ancestors to get creative. With big game like mammoths or bison becoming scarce, they had to rethink their menu. Think of it as the prehistoric equivalent of scrambling to make a meal from whatever's left in your fridge. Evidence suggests they leaned harder on small animals, fish, and tough plants that could survive the ash-heavy environment. This meant crafting new tools, finer blades for cutting plants, maybe nets for fishing. Some researchers even think Toba pushed humans to level up their social skills. Picture trying to coordinate a hunt when you can barely see through the ash clouds. You'd need to trust your crew, share what little food you had, and maybe invent a few new hand signals to get the job done. That's not just surviving, that's building a community under pressure. Now let's be real, luck played a role too. Not every group made it through Toba's chaos, and some were just in the right place at the right time. Coastal areas, for instance, might have been less buried in ash, and marine life like fish or shellfish could have been a lifeline. Sites in South Africa like Pinnacle Point show humans munching on seafood during this period, suggesting the ocean was their MVP. But luck only gets you so far. The groups that survived were the ones who could pivot, innovate, and stick together. It's like they were the ultimate underdogs pulling off a comeback against a planet that seemed determined to wipe them out. Here's where Toba gets really spicy. Some scientists think this disaster was a turning point for human evolution. The harsh conditions might have acted like a pressure cooker, forcing our ancestors to get smarter faster. The need to survive pushed them to develop better tools, like more precise stone blades, and maybe even early forms of language to coordinate group efforts. It's like Toba was nature's way of saying step up or step out. And step up they did. The survivors passed on their genes, and their resilience might have laid the groundwork for the humans we are today, capable of building cities, inventing Wi-Fi, and yes, arguing about which streaming service is the best. But let's zoom out for a second and laugh at ourselves a bit. While our ancestors were out there dodging ash clouds and reinventing survival, we're stressing over a weak phone signal or a lukewarm latte. They didn't have the luxury of complaining, they had to act. And yet, here we are with all our tech and comfort still not great at preparing for the next big curveball. Toba's a reminder that Earth can throw a punch, and our ancestors took it on the chin. Today we've got climate change pandemics and natural disasters that keep us on our toes. Maybe we could learn a thing or two from those prehistoric hustlers who didn't just survive but thrived in the face of chaos. So what's the next chapter in this saga? How did Toba's long-term effects ripple through human history? Did it really almost wipe us out, or were some groups tougher than we give them credit for? And what can we take away from their story to make sure we're ready when the next disaster knocks? Stick with me, because we're about to unpack the lasting impact of Toba and how it shaped the humans we've become. Trust me, this story is only getting wilder. Alright, we've just waded through the chaos of the Toba super eruption 74,000 years ago, when a supervolcano turned the world into a gritty, ash-choked nightmare, and our ancestors had to hustle to stay alive. We've seen how they adapted, got smarter, and maybe got a little lucky to dodge extinction, but the story doesn't end with them brushing the ash off their shoulders and calling it a day. Toba's fallout had a long tail, reshaping the planet and humanity's path in ways that still echo today. So let's zoom into the aftermath, explore how this disaster left its mark on our species, and figure out what it teaches us about facing our own modern-day challenges. Because let's face it, if our ancestors could handle a volcanic apocalypse with just rocks and vibes, we've got no excuse for freaking out over a power outage. Let's start with the big picture. Toba didn't just disrupt life for a few years, it changed the game for centuries. The volcanic winter triggered by all that ash and sulfur gas blocking the sun could have lasted up to a decade, and the ripple effects went on much longer. Forests shrank, grasslands spread, and entire ecosystems got a hard reset. For our ancestors, this meant their world looked completely different post-Toba. The animals they hunted, the plants they foraged, all of it shifted. Some regions like parts of Africa and India show signs that humans kept on trucking, adapting to new landscapes. But others, well, let's just say not every cave clan made it to the sequel. Sites like Jwalapuram in India reveal stone tools from before and after the eruption, hinting that some groups were tough enough to stick it out. But elsewhere, the silence in the archaeological records suggests entire communities might have blinked out. Now, here's where things get juicy. Toba might have been the ultimate stress test for human evolution. Some scientists argue that the survivors of this catastrophe weren't just lucky, they were the MVPs of adaptability. The harsh conditions forced them to level up in ways that shaped who we are today. For example, the need to find new food sources likely pushed humans to innovate. Finer stone tools like microliths started showing up in the archaeological record around this time. These weren't just for show, they were precision instruments for cutting plants or scraping hides, suggesting our ancestors were getting crafty. And it wasn't just about tools. Toba's lean times probably made teamwork non-negotiable. Sharing food, coordinating hunts, and protecting the group became do or die. It's like Toba was nature's way of saying work together or you're toast. And those who figured it out passed on their genes, wiring us for the social smarts we rely on today. But let's not romanticize it too much. Survival wasn't pretty. Some groups likely faced brutal choices, abandoning the weak, fighting over the last scraps of food, or risking dangerous treks to find better land. Imagine the drama, no group chat to settle disputes, just a bunch of stressed out hunter-gatherers trying to agree on whether to stay in a freezing cave or brave the ash-covered plains. And while some thrived, others didn't make it. The genetic bottleneck theory we mentioned earlier suggests humanity's population took a nosedive, maybe to as few as 10,000 people. That's like the entire human race fitting into a small concert venue. But there's debate here. Some researchers point to evidence like those Indian tool sites suggesting Toba didn't hit everyone equally hard. Maybe our ancestors were more resilient than we think, or maybe some just had better real estate like coastal spots where fish were still plentiful. Now let's have a little fun and laugh at ourselves. While our ancestors were out there reinventing survival in a world gone gray, we're over here panicking when our phone battery dips below 20%. They were crafting tools from flint. We're crafting Instagram stories. They were dodging starvation. We're dodging spoilers for the latest binge-worthy show. But here's the thing, Toba's legacy isn't just about how tough our ancestors were, it's about what we can learn from them. Their ability to adapt, innovate, and stick together got them through a disaster that could have ended us. Today we've got our own threats, looming climate change, extreme weather, maybe even another supervolcano if Earth's feeling spicy. The question is, are we as ready as they were? Because let's be honest, our idea of prepping is usually just stocking up on snacks before a Netflix marathon. Toba's long-term impact went beyond survival tactics. It might have set the stage for humanity's big leap forward. The pressure to innovate could have sparked early advances in culture like art or symbolic thinking. Some archaeologists point to evidence of shell beads and ochre use in African sites from around this period, hinting that humans were starting to think beyond just staying alive. Maybe Toba's chaos pushed them to dream bigger, to tell stories, to create. It's wild to think that a disaster could have been the nudge we needed to become the species that builds skyscrapers and sends rovers to Mars. But it also makes you wonder, what would it take for us to step up like that today? Are we still wired for that kind of resilience, or have we gotten too comfy with our delivery apps and climate-controlled lives? Here's a thought to chew on: our ancestors didn't have a heads up about Toba. No one sent them a push notification saying heads up, volcanoes about to ruin your day. They had to figure it out on the fly, and they did. Today we've got science, tech, and a whole lot of data to warn us about what's coming: rising sea levels, megastorms, you name it. But are we using it? Or are we too busy arguing over who makes the best oat milk latte to plan for the next big shakeup? Toba is a wake-up call from 74,000 years ago, reminding us that the planet doesn't mess around. If we want to keep thriving, we might need to channel a bit of that prehistoric hustle, minus the part where we're running from hyenas. So where do we go from here? Toba didn't just test our ancestors, it left us a playbook for survival. How can we use their lessons to prep for our own uncertain future? What does it take to build resilience in a world that's still full of surprises? And how do we make sure we're not the ones left in the dust when the next big disaster hits? Hang tight, because we're about to wrap this up with some big takeaways and a few ideas on how to channel your inner cave dweller to face whatever's coming next. This story's got one more twist you won't want to miss. Okay, we've journeyed through the ash-choked chaos of the Toba super eruption, where 74,000 years ago, our ancestors faced a world that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out. We've seen how they dodged extinction with a mix of grit smarts and a pinch of luck, adapting to a planet turned upside down by a supervolcano's tantrum. We've explored how Toba's fallout reshaped ecosystems, pushed human innovation, and maybe even sparked the cultural leaps that made us who we are. But now, let's bring it home. What does this ancient disaster mean for us today, scrolling through our feeds and sipping overpriced coffee? How can we take the lessons from Toba and use them to face our own modern challenges? And what can we do to make sure we're ready when the next big curveball comes our way? Let's wrap this up with some big ideas and a few practical tips to channel your inner cave dweller. Let's hit rewind for a quick recap. The Toba super eruption was no small hiccup. It was a planet-shaking catastrophe that blanketed the Earth in ash, triggered a decade-long volcanic winter, and nearly sent humanity to the history books as a failed experiment. Our ancestors faced collapsing food chains, toxic water, and a world where survival meant reinventing everything on the fly. They adapted by moving to new territories, crafting better tools, and leaning on each other like never before. Some argue Toba caused a genetic bottleneck, shrinking our population to a mere 10,000 souls, while others point to evidence of resilient groups in places like India and Africa who kept on thriving. Either way, their survival wasn't just a fluke, it was a masterclass in resilience that left its mark on our DNA and our story as a species. Now let's get real for a second. It's easy to sit back and marvel at our ancestors' hustle, but what does Toba have to do with us? Well, it's a neon-lit reminder that Earth doesn't play favorites. Back then, it was a supervolcano. Today, it's climate change megastorms or wildfires that seem to pop up like unwanted notifications. We've got tech and science they could only dream of, but are we using it to prepare, or are we too busy arguing over who gets the armrest on a plane? Our ancestors didn't have the luxury of ignoring reality. They had to act and fast. Their story screams one big lesson: when the world goes sideways, adaptability and community are your best bets for coming out on top. Think about it. Those early humans didn't survive Toba by going it alone. They shared food-coordinated hunts and probably had some heated cave debates about whether to stay put or move on. That teamwork wasn't just nice to have, it was their lifeline. Fast forward to now, and we're not so different. When hurricanes hit or wildfires rage, it's the communities that band together, sharing resources, checking on neighbors, rebuilding together, that come through strongest. Toba teaches us that no one survives a crisis solo. So maybe it's time to stop doom scrolling and start building those connections. Know your neighbors, join a local group, or at least figure out who's got the best generator when the power goes out. Here's another gem from Toba: preparation beats panic every time. Our ancestors didn't know a supervolcano was coming, but they were already nomadic, already experimenting with tools, already learning to read their environment. Today we've got no excuse. We've got weather forecasts, climate models, and enough data to know trouble's brewing. So what's stopping us from prepping like they did? Start small, stash some non-perishable food, keep a flashlight handy, maybe even learn a skill that doesn't rely on Wi-Fi. Because if our ancestors could pivot from hunting mammoths to fishing in ash-choked rivers, we can probably figure out how to survive a week without Uber Eats. Let's have a quick laugh at ourselves while we're at it. While they were out there dodging starvation and crafting tools from flint, we're over here stressing when our coffee order gets messed up or our favorite show buffers. They were fighting for survival. We're fighting for the last slice of pizza. But Toba's story isn't just about how much tougher they were, it's about how we're wired with the same potential. Their resilience is in us, buried under layers of modern convenience. The question is, what would it take to tap into that? If the world threw us a Toba-level curveball, would we rise to the challenge, or would we be too busy tweeting our complaints to notice? Here's the deeper takeaway. Toba didn't just test our ancestors, it shaped them. The pressure to survive might have sparked the creativity and cooperation that led to art, language, and culture. It's wild to think a disaster could have been the push we needed to become the species that builds rockets and writes poetry. But it also makes you wonder what challenges today could push us to evolve further. Climate change is real, and it's not waiting for us to finish our binge watch. Maybe it's time to channel that prehistoric hustle, get informed, get involved, and start thinking about how we can adapt to a changing world before it forces our hand. So what's the game plan? First, take a page from our ancestors and prioritize community. Join local preparedness groups, learn who's got your back, and share what you've got when times get tough. Second, get proactive. You don't need to build a bunker, but a basic emergency kit, water, food, a first aid kit can go a long way. Third, stay curious. Our ancestors survived by learning fast and adapting faster. Keep an eye on the world around you, whether it's climate news or local risks, and don't just shrug it off. Toba showed us that survival isn't about being the strongest, it's about being the smartest and the most connected. If you're sitting there thinking, wow, those cave dwellers were something else, then let's make it real. What would you do if you were dropped into their world? Could you hack it with just a spear and some berries? Or would you be Googling how to survive apocalypse on a dead phone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear how you'd fare in Toba's aftermath. And if this story got you thinking, hit that like button, share it with your crew, and subscribe so you don't miss our next dive into history's wildest moments. Want more epic survival tales? Check out our video on the Ice Age, when humans outsmarted a frozen world for another dose of prehistoric badassery. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Stay sharp, stay ready, and we'll catch you in the next one.